Yeah, so I'm Matthew Grasmick. I am a product director at Acquia, and I lead the Drupal acceleration team for our core contribution, as well as our developer experience team, which manages, among other things, Acquia Cloud IDE. And today I'm going to talk to you about what this product is and convince you, or try to convince you, that it's the best Drupal development environment. Before we get started, there's a poll in Zoom, and it asks you what local development environment you use today. If you can answer that, we'd appreciate it. Kind of help us get a better idea of who we're talking to today and what y'all are using. So we're going to start out by talking about the elephant in the room, which is the fact that Drupal development is pretty hard. And a big part of why it's hard is development environments. So let's take an example. Let's say this is you, a Drupal developer, and you want to do something really simple, like take your laptop and put Drupal on it. Well, it's actually not that simple to do, because before you do it, you have to make a kind of difficult decision that's hard to navigate, especially if you're new to Drupal. You have to decide what your local dev stack is going to be. There's a lot of pros and cons here: operating system, resources, features. And people don't typically know how to navigate this. And even when they do try to navigate it, there's a lot of common problems they hit. So tell me, this should sound familiar to you, at least one of these things. So a lot of these, if you're a Windows user, these things just don't work on Windows, right? Some of them do, and when they do, they only kind of do. A lot of the Drupal stack just isn't built for development on Windows. Even if you do get something that works on your operating system, it's pretty common to use a company laptop to do development, which means there might be a firewall, there might be administrative permissions, maybe you can't download or install or get the right access to configure a directory for the local development solution. And even if you get past that, depending on your internet connection, how much RAM, often you don't get 16 gigs of RAM on a company laptop, or how much processing power you have, things are pretty slow. There's a lot to download, especially with the kind of Docker containerized world that we're in now. And maybe you have to take up half of your RAM and CPU just to get something running. So things go slow. And even if you get something installed, when you get a problem, it's your problem, because it's about your computer. And a lot of times you hit snags where the rest of your team has trouble helping you because it's an idiosyncratic problem that has to do with your computer and something that went wrong. So you lose a lot of productivity. So usually this ends up looking like this. It blows up in your face. And that's what we want to fix. So Cloud IDE fixes this problem. Basically, it's your IDE, but now it's in the cloud. It's not on your computer anymore. You don't need to set up your local machine with Cloud IDE. Acquia will set up something for you. So we turn this into this. Acquia Cloud IDE, you can think of it as kind of two things combined. It is a development server optimized for Drupal, hosted by Acquia, but it's also an IDE that you can access through your browser to do code editing. So I'm going to go through a 5-minute demo of using it, but really briefly, note that this screenshot uses a URL at the top. It's in Chrome, and you visit this in your browser. You can write code, edit files, run a terminal, log in and preview your Drupal site, and it's all the stuff you would normally do locally. It's just not running locally. So it runs on any operating system, as long as you can get a browser. It can actually even run on your tablet or phone if you want. Not that you necessarily would. It's a standardized setup. If everyone on your team uses it, everyone on your team has the same environment, which makes onboarding faster. It means problems are reproducible, and it makes it a lot more scalable in terms of process. And it's already optimized for Drupal. So I'll talk to you about some of the things on it. One of the great things is Xdebug already works, and we'll show a demo of that. That's often a pain to set up, but it's really valuable. Now you don't have to set it up, and it's fast, right? It's co-located or close in the same realms as Acquia hardware, which means you're syncing between cloud sites and the IDE. It happens quickly. You're not running email, you're not running Slack on this machine. It's just for development, which means it's a lot faster. So some things we have on it. Full stack that you'd expect from a LAMP stack, of course, Apache, PHP, MySQL, et cetera, things you need for front-end builds. Drupal tooling, Drush, Code Sniffer, Composer, Xdebug, that's all installed for you. And also there's things like Acquia CLI that are installed already, so you can really easily connect to the cloud. And now I'm going to show you a quick demo. And it's going to be a full screen demo. There we go. And I'm just going to talk over this because who knows with Zoom audio and videos. So real quick, we're going to make an IDE. There's a couple ways to do this. We're actually releasing the feature to do this in Cloud UI next week. But you can also do it through Acquia CLI on the command line. And if you run this Acquia CLI IDE create command, it'll ask you some questions like, what do you want to call it? Here, I'm just calling it demo. And it's doing some really cool stuff in the background now. It's actually going and making a brand new server, installing Drupal on it, installing the IDE on it, and it gives you two URLs. One is the URL to look at the IDE if you want to edit code. And the other is the URL of the Drupal site that's hosted inside of it if you want to click around and actually do some site building. In this demo, I'm just going to control click on the IDE URL, pops open in my browser, and we're done. We've got a brand new Drupal development environment ready to go. And I'll just point out a couple user interface type things, not all of them. This might look familiar to you. It's based off of an open source version of Visual Studio called Acquia. Just note we are in the browser, right? You can just go to this URL, log in, and that's how you get access to it. Everything you'd expect. Take a look at the files, pop open a file easily. Here's your code. You can edit it. You can, hover over a class, take a look at the definition of the class or the method, get a preview of that, hop into it. You can also, do the normal file operations you'd expect, search for a string inside of your files. Like I can search for auto load here, find all of the results, double click it, pop it open. It's a lot of the stuff. It's everything you'd expect, but you didn't have to install software. Something you might not expect is you can actually run a terminal here. So I can pop this open and just start running commands. Let's say I wanted to download and install the CTools module. Well, Composer 2 is here. I run a quick command. We know Composer 2 is pretty fast. Done. We've got CTools downloaded and installed via Composer. If I wanted to commit this change, I don't even have to use Git on the command line. I can actually take a look at the diff visually. You can see my Composer JSON file changed. Enter a Git commit message here, stage the file, and press a commit button, and it creates a new Git commit on the branch that's checked out. Of course, if you want to use the command line, you still can. So you can kind of prove that we did what we said we did. Run git log. There's my commit. There's my commit message. It worked. Run a git diff or git show, and it shows you exactly what changed. Next up, I'll show you how to sync. So, of course, you probably have a production site, staging site, something like that on Acquia Cloud. Let's say you want to pull exactly your staging site into your IDE. Do it really quick. Well, you click that button, it automatically runs an Acquia CLI command for you and asks you which environment you want to pull from. In this case, stage. It has a branch called Drupal 9 checked out on it. Acquia CLI knows how to clone the repository, check out the branch, notices there's more than one database, asks which one, and we'll say, we want the default database. And it even intelligently sees that you have Composer JSON and installs Composer dependencies for you. It's okay if you don't use Composer, it still works. This is conditional, but the support is built in. I do see questions streaming in. I can get to some of these questions after the very last part of this. So I just clicked a button to open Drupal in the IDE. And this is just kind of prove this is my staging site. My staging username and password work. I can log in, I can click around, I can do site building. And so the last part of the demo is to show you how to debug. This is, I'm going to show you Xdebug. Some of you may not be familiar with it. This is probably the most powerful debugging tool for writing PHP code that there is. It's already installed and configured in the IDE. It does slow down your site, so it's turned off by default, but we can turn it on really easily with an Acquia CLI command. We just run ACLI Xdebug, it turns on. And what we're interested in doing is actually stepping through a file, a PHP script as it executes and kind of inspecting and seeing things, seeing what the values of variables are and such so that we can debug. So let's say I want to debug index PHP. I'm going to open it up, hover over this left-hand column and insert a breakpoint. So this says, hey, I want you to stop here in the middle of a PHP execution. And then we can press start so that Xdebug listens for a script, and then we start running a script. And the way we do that is just open Drupal. Of course, you load it in a browser, it's going to run index.php. So I click this button, go back to the other tab, and here I am. I'm in the middle of a PHP execution, and I can use buttons to, execute the next line, step in to this method, look at that definition. I can inspect the value of variables at this moment to see, oh, you know what, that's supposed to be a string, but it looks like it's an array. And I can look at the call stack to see how I got here. Just incredibly powerful and also incredibly convenient that this just works for you out of the box. And I think that's it for the demo. So I think I actually want to save questions for the end. We have a lot of them here, and we'll get to them. But next up, for the next 5 minutes, Mike Sharon, engineering manager here at Acquia, is going to talk about how his team actually uses Cloud IDE.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, everybody. My name is Michael Sharon. I've been with Acquia for about 5 years now, almost 6. Actually, fun fact, Matthew and I both started in professional services. So we spent a lot of time with Acquia building websites on behalf of our customers using our tooling and hosting. So this is, us kind of solving our own problems, right? We all struggled with managing teams over the years that had, everybody wanted to have their own development environment, right? Everybody has their idiosyncrasies and workflows that they like in particular. And Cloud IDE gives you a option to make things much more streamlined, right? So currently I'm running an engineering team that's building brand new Acquia products, and we do use Cloud IDEs as our development environment. We're building Acquia CMS, which is a new Drupal distribution that Acquia is offering to people on our platform. It's similar to Lightning, only much more complicated, right? It's basically giving people the ability to spin up Drupal sites much more quickly. So the product itself is a complex Drupal website, right? And the thing that my team's building, it's just like yours, where when you're building Drupal sites, we use the same tools, same processes, same best practices. So I am contractually obligated by my marketing department to say that we are, quote, drinking our own champagne, right? This is us using our own tools in order to solve common problems in Drupal. Next, please. So a little bit more about Acquia CMS. It is a Drupal distribution, and it needs to be able to automatically integrate with all of our biggest products, right? So it needs to run automatically with very little configuration in both Acquia Cloud and Site Factory. And that is difficult, right? You need to be able to have configuration that just sets itself up and is able to detect the information that it needs in order to run correctly. And that adds a level of complexity on top of Drupal, which is already complex, that really makes consistency pay off for us as an engineering team, right? So it's a super opinionated Drupal distribution. It ties together all our products. And the goal is for customers who were previously spending months and months building out a Drupal website. We want them to be able to build a Drupal website within days, right? And it's designed so specifically with Site Studio so that non-developers can build a reasonably good-looking website without actually having to write custom code. Next. So my team, we have 11 engineers that are working on Acquia CMS, including myself. Besides me, everyone else on the team was completely new to Cloud IDEs. We're globally distributed, so 60% of the developers working on ACMS are located in India, and the other 40% are remote throughout the United States. So we're not, especially in pandemic world, we're not physically located in the same room. So having individual local development environments would be super difficult, right? Because you don't have somebody sitting right across from you to help you kind of figure out your local problems. Basically asking everyone to use a development environment that's standardized in the cloud removes all that variation and makes things much easier. It also it allows us to have a standard development environment for creating our training materials. So our support staff will be using Cloud IDEs. Our learning services team, when they create training videos and customer facing documentation, they'll be using the same interface. So it'll, when you go and you want to look and physically see, if you're a visual person, I like to see visuals. The interfaces that the documentation will drive me towards will match the thing that I actually use as my daily driver. Next. So yeah, it lets us move a lot faster with higher quality. We have less problems, right? I know everyone on this call has struggled with, a bug that appears on one developer's machine, and another developer comes along and says, they go to try to reproduce the issue, and they go, oh, it's not broken on my machine. And it ends up being some obscure, OS configuration difference, or maybe somebody's, testing with a slightly different version of PHP or something, some PHP library is different. There's some weird variation that you just can't control for when people are responsible for building their own environments. I just don't need to worry about that. It also makes it really easy for me to onboard developers. I'm able to give them a fully functional integrated environment on day one. They don't have to spend, the 24 to 48 or more hours, depending on how experienced the developer is, to get their environment set up. It just literally works within minutes, which is great. I can troubleshoot faster. It's consistent. The security is even tighter. This is a big deal, especially for those of us who work with governments in the federal space. When I have to offboard somebody on my team, it's very simple for me to just remove the permission on the subscription, and then they automatically are no longer able to access their development environment. They don't have files that might be related to a customer on their computer. Everything's clean, and they no longer have the access. It's very portable. Like Matthew mentioned earlier, this is just something that I think is really awesome. Like, I can use a Cloud IDE on my tablet if I have it bookmarked, which is just super cool because I've never been able to do anything development-wise on a tablet, which now I can. And it automatically just works with Acquia products. I think professional services within Acquia over the years has made a bunch of money setting up product integrations for customers, things like DevOps pipelines and making sure things can automatically deploy out to repositories. We've done a lot of that work for you in Cloud IDEs. The pipes are all just kind of wired up, and it just works. Next. That's it. Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Mike. So if you're interested, we're about to get into questions, but if you're interested, most customers have one IDE for free right now. All of our Site Factory customers, all of our Acquia Cloud Enterprise customers, and starting in March, all of our Acquia Cloud Professional customers will get one for free too, which means everybody that's a customer will get one for free. And you can get more. I saw a question in chat. We can follow with the follow-up email, send some details on pricing and how many you can buy and that sort of thing. But one for free right now, running those commands, and starting next week using the Cloud UI. It's one IDE per subscription. Looks like the question in there. So let me just run through a few chat questions, and I'll stop sharing my screen because I can't actually see the formal question pane while I'm sharing my screen. But yeah, Drush is installed. You can use Drupal console. You just require it via Composer, no problem. Composer 1 and 2 are there. You don't have to use Composer. You can use any supported version of Drupal. You can do front-end builds, NPM, Node, Ruby, RVM, all those tools are there. So you can run your front-end build process inside of the IDE. And I think that's most of the questions in chat. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and take a look at the other open questions. Can it be integrated with external repos via GitLab? Yep, absolutely. It's just like your own IDE, Git remote add, whatever you want, and you can pull from Bitbucket, GitHub, GitLab, etc. Do you need anything on your computer to make IDE run? No, not to run. Today, you need Acquia CLI just to create it. I think next week, we're going to remove that requirement, and you can just click a button in Cloud UI, and you'll be able to create it then. But running the IDE, no, you can run it on a tablet, like Mike said. How do you manage multiple instances? Depends on what you mean by that. Actually, I gotta hit So you can just have multiple IDEs and they're at different URLs, and you can put different sites in them. You can put different applications in them. Hopefully that answered the question. The way that they are limited is that they're tied to a particular developer and subscription. So we didn't build it this way initially, but we ended up building it this way because we didn't want one developer logging into another developer's machine and looking at their private SSH keys or other credentials. We want this to really be your IDE in the cloud. So it is your specific cloud login gets you to your IDE, and another person on your team can have another IDE for their user, but it is separated by the cloud user that kind of owns that particular IDE. There is no recommended internet browser, but I wouldn't recommend like Internet Explorer 6, right? There's some that I guess we can identify as not great, but it really should work. We haven't had any complaints or bugs filed related to browser compatibility, as far as I'm aware. Is it suitable for government use? So we have federal clients that use it. It's not FedRAMP compliant right now. It will be FedRAMP compliant, but I can't give you a date on it. It's certainly a high priority on our roadmap. That's not a blocker for a lot of government customers, but it's something you kind of have to decide for yourself whether FedRAMP compliance is a requirement for you. As a rule, if you just don't put sensitive information in an IDE, if that's what you're worried about, you can use sanitization commands and things like that to prevent anything sensitive ever going into it. I think we have a strong security model, and we're shooting for FedRAMP compliance for sure. Let's see, I'm gonna scroll down. I don't know if there's a way to like click that a question has been answered. They're probably, answer, but if anyone wants to go through, Mike, and mark them as answered, that might be good. Can you execute code?
See, there a way to mark the answers, but yeah, we'll just.
I don't know. We're Drupal experts. We're not Zoom experts.
One question that jumped out at me: does it work with Site Factory? Yes, it does. So we're currently integrating Acquia CMS with both ACE and Site Factory. So there is some code level changes that need to be put in place for Site Factory to work with Drupal core. I would say the one, I guess, caveat right now is that Cloud IDEs don't support multiple databases. So if you're testing, if you have several sites deployed in your factory and you need to switch from one to the other, you would have to do use a drush command to pull down the files and the database for that multi-site.
Wait, it's not. Is that true? It's better than that. No.
Oh, give me. I want
it. So I put multi-site support this way. We support one site at a time. But if you've got multi-site or Site Factory, so let's say you got 100 sites on Site Factory, you can sync down one at a time, and we will automate pulling down the right database and the right files. So Acquia CLI is smart enough to know it's on Site Factory and figure out which sites are available and prompt you. The hitch is it's one at a time. So if you pull down one site, you work on it, and then you want to work to the next site, you got to pull down the next site and overwrite site one. So it's multi-site supported, but one at a time. And the reason for that is you only get one URL for your IDE. So you can't really do like the mapping of multiple URLs to multiple sites, but it is integrated and supporting Site Factory in the way I described right now today, also with off of Site Factory multi-sites as well. Of course, there's always crazy things you could be doing with your multi-site that we don't support, because multi-site is kind of a crazy thing in the Drupal world, and it's super flexible. So it's not like carte blanche, everything works, but your basic multi-site functionality should be there. Mike, you got to try that out. You haven't used that yet?
I'm in.
You got
to do it. It's great.
It's been like that for a while now. It's one of the first things. All right, let's see. I think we answered lots of Site Factory things, lots of multi-site questions. Any chance FedRAMP compliance comes before Dev Desktop end of life in June? Yeah, let's talk about that. No, I don't think there's a chance of that, but we're not going to leave any Dev Desktop users with FedRAMP out in the wind. So we are formalizing a plan to have Lando support and that would be well in advance of the end of life in June. We already, like, if you, like, Cloud IDE is definitely what we recommend. But if you can't use Cloud IDE, we will support an alternative, and the alternative is Lando. And we today make sure that Acquia CLI runs inside of Lando, so you can do push and pull. And over the next few months, we're going to expand that so that it does more things. Like, it spins up a default recipe that looks very much like an Acquia environment. So by the time Dev Desktop end of life comes around, there will be two options. There'll be IDEs and Lando. Lando's great for a lot of reasons, but it's not as great as Cloud IDE because it doesn't change, I mean, that's my opinion, but it doesn't change this fundamental paradigm of it doesn't get it off your computer, right? But maybe that's, you have a restriction where you need it to run on your computer, and that's okay.
Hey, Matt, somebody had a question earlier that I thought was interesting. They asked if they had an internet outage, how would they solve for that? And it made me ask you, the settings file for Thea, right? It's just like VS Code, right? So there should be a configuration file that I could import into a local VS Code if I did need to run Lando. Does that seem like a reasonable thing you could do as like a disaster recovery scenario if you had?
Yeah, it's true. It's a JSON file. You can access it, so you can move your settings between your local and upstream. Usually I get the question, what if I'm on an airplane or something and I have a slow internet connection? Actually, IDE works pretty well with a slow internet connection, surprisingly. It's a lot of things happen on the front end. And from what I've heard, although I haven't experienced it myself, like, it doesn't feel laggy even when you're on a really slow internet connection. A lot of Mike's team for Acquia CMS is based offshore in India. There's often internet speed issues generally, but those issues don't seem to degrade the Cloud IDE experience. So what if one developer needs to access another developer's environment? So we kind of support that now, but not IDE access. So we actually have a feature that lets you share your environment with someone else so that they can like preview it, look at the site, the Drupal part of it, log in, that sort of thing. But it doesn't give them access to change your code or log into your command line. So it's largely helpful for getting stakeholders involved, QA, that sort of thing. It's not really helpful for a developer getting in and changing your code. I think that a screen share or a shared branch or something like that is better in that situation. I think we have on the roadmap the idea that you could transfer an IDE between owners, but I don't think we ever want two people logging into the same IDE at the same time because of the security model. I need to configure something outside of the Drupal root. Add an environment variable to Apache comp file, for example. So this is a yes and no. You can edit things outside of the Drupal root, but you can't edit everything outside of the Drupal root. So you have access to a lot of directories, including directories where you can place executables, but you can't change the Apache configuration in particular. You see any other good questions, Mike? I'm just rolling in.
There was one about Vue build scripts, which I answered.
Okay.
Server configuration questions. Can we access MySQL? Can we change the MySQL PHP and Apache configuration?
You can change MySQL configuration. You can change PHP configuration. You basically get your own, you can have multiple my.cnf files or php.ini files. Like, you get your own. So you don't like edit the base one, but you can override it with whatever you want. But I don't think you can change Apache. So PHP and MySQL, yes. Apache, no. Does Acquia IDE work with BLT? Yep. That's what Mike uses with Acquia CMS team, right? So you guys are using it all the time.
Can you install VS Code extensions? I actually don't know. Can you? I know you can change your configuration. You can have user-specific config over the default that gets saved into your Cloud IDE. But I do not know about adding extensions.
You can't add your own. We have added a ton, and there's a ton more we could add. And we're very open to requests. There's probably a lot we don't know about. Like, there's probably cool extensions we should install, that we haven't heard of yet, and if you tell us about them, we take a look and say, yeah, that makes sense for all Cloud IDE users to get, we'll install it. And, it's pretty likely we'll install it. So we have a lot
both
now.
Matt and Aurelian props. My team and I have both made feature requests throughout the Acquia CMS build, and they have been lightning fast with turning those around. Not to set expectations poorly, Matthew, sorry to put you under the gun, but they are pretty responsive to feature requests.
That's Aurelian. He's referencing our product owner for the product.
That's right.
And Pratik, our product manager, who's also on the Zoom as well. There's a few of us here. So I see a question. When pulling one multi-site, you say it overwrites the DB with the next multi-site DB. Will it back up the current site automatically so we don't lose current work and restores everything? No, there's not automated backups. The idea that this is it's like a fungible workspace for you. It's not a production environment or a hosting environment. It's your IDE, and like you're free to destroy things in it, really.
But you should do a config export before you pull down the second database so that your changes are saved locally in your config management strategy.
Yeah, it'd be pretty easy to back it up because we have Drush, and you could just run a Drush, database dump in one command, and you're done. But it's not automated for you. Does each IDE have its own instance of Solr? No. So yeah, that's a big gap there. Solr's pretty complicated. And I think in most cases, like you have multiple Solr servers. You can really easily connect your IDE to your dev environment Solr server, right? So you can still do your development and such, but it doesn't have a dedicated IDE Solr server.
I think Acquia CMS has a clever hack for this that you guys can review once we get it published publicly. Basically, we're able to detect what environment we're running in, and if Solr isn't available, we fall back to default database search implementation, and then the views that are pulling from that index are the same, right? So it's from the front end perspective, the things that you're testing that are using your index, they're agnostic as to what the actual engine is that's running the search. So to a developer, they look essentially the same.
Here's a good question. Is it possible to automatically run other commands, npm for instance, while rebuilding or setting up your site? It's definitely possible. I wouldn't call it an IDE feature. I'll tell you the way I like doing this, which is I like using Composer to do this. So Composer has, what do you call them? Well, they're scripts, and you can define it so that the script gets run in response to a particular Composer event. So you can define in your Composer JSON a post install script, which means every time that Composer install is run, it will automatically run npm install in a certain directory. I like doing that, and then I just have a bunch of Composer commands that I can run, like Composer test, Composer sniff, and Composer install, and it just does things automatically. Since you saw Acquia CLI runs Composer install for you, if it sees that you're using Composer, that would actually fully automate things. So you'd run that Acquia CLI pull, it would say, you're using Composer, I'm gonna run Composer install, and then Composer would say, oh yeah, I'm supposed to run npm build after that. And you just have an automated workflow pretty easily that way. You could also use BLT, but I kind of shy away from doing that for this particular use case now because it works in Composer, and Composer is a little higher level, so it seems to simplify things. Let's see, what else we got? I did figure out how to mark a question as answered. All right, so I have 3 clients, 3 sites. Can I use IDE to work on all 3 sites? I would recommend using 1 IDE per site, having 3 IDEs. So an IDE is tied to 2 things, a user and a subscription. So I guess this is, I don't know if this is a partner or something with 3 clients, but if they have 3 different organizations or subscriptions on Acquia Cloud, you don't want one client's code in the same environment as another client's code, really, anyway. I mean, that's part of the security model. We want to be commingling data from subscriptions and users. So I would argue it's better for a lot of reasons to have 3 IDEs for 3 sites. It means you don't have to keep like overwriting and wiping out things, and you can just log into 1 IDE for one client, 1 IDE for another client. if I was doing things locally, I'd do it the same way. Like if I was using Lando, I'd have 3 containers, 1 for each site. I wouldn't shove them all in the same container. So that's how I would suggest doing that. Is there a way to install Varnish on Cloud IDE? No. Varnish is great for hosting sites. It is not great for developing sites. So the same reason, like we didn't put Varnish in Dev Desktop, or we wouldn't put Varnish in a Lando image. I cannot tell you how many times our customers get confused when Varnish is turned on and they're not expecting it to be turned on. So turning it off by default resolves a lot of pain. So it is not in there right now. Although I know there's some cases where it could be useful. Let's see. Any others? I think I've got, were quite a lot of questions.
I just realized I was answering only panelists, so my answers in chat were only going to you. That's fun. Sorry, guys. But I think we've covered all of them.
Oh, geez, I was doing that too. Oh, sorry, guys. I answered all these questions. I answered all these questions and nobody saw the answers. Okay, interesting. Well, let's go. We should go back through chat and.
We've covered them. We've done a pretty good job.
Okay. Can somebody paste in the URL to get the demo of Cloud IDE? Yeah, you'll get the URL you get the recording of this, but I will also give you a URL to the product page on acquia.com, which includes a video that covers a lot of the same stuff. So let's do that, and let's not send it to panelists. Let's send it to panelists and attendees. And that should do it. Yeah, Mike just posted in Composer events. So if you want to respond to a Composer install, Composer update, Composer something else, you can do that.
Yeah, so a couple of people asked about like how do they do their front end builds, and we responded into the void that these Composer build scripts, you could have a post install and post update commands. And the way Acquia CMS does it is that the post install command will trigger the post update command so that it does in both. It'll fire your package JSON, and whatever build script you have defined in package JSON, it'll then do your CSS, SAS scripts or whatever you need to do for front end builds. So that's the way most of us do it.
All right. Will the recording be made available? Yes, it will. And you will get an email with it. That's how you can find it. I understand we need a FAR file. Is there an alternative? Yeah, the alternative is coming out next week. The alternative, so when you say we need a FAR file, it means you have to download Acquia CLI and run that command in the demo to create an IDE. Next week, we're releasing a button in the Cloud UI. Let's just be create IDE, and then you don't need Acquia CLI, which means you don't need a FAR file. So that is coming very soon. And then you really won't need anything on your local machine, even to get started. So can we save IDE preferences globally so all new IDE instances share those settings? No, but I really want this one too. And this is a feature request that we have that we are going to definitely do. This is a highly prioritized one. And we're also going to try to think about not just globally for like an application, but what if you as an individual developer wants a different flavor of IDE to configure those settings? We want to have a way to do that as well. So like the application level and the user level. And that's probably a more near-term thing in the roadmap, because I think it's certainly a lot easier than FedRAMP compliance. Doesn't involve the government.
Matt, do you want to talk about, I answered it in the Q&A thingy, but somebody asked, can they do live debugging like they do in PHP Storm? Can you talk a little bit about Xdebug?
I probably have to try. I don't know if I've tried that yet, because you can insert a breakpoint, step through it, look at the variables. You can use the terminal to execute PHP code. I think I know what the person means with like, there's a little feature in PHP Storm where like you execute arbitrary PHP at that moment, like in the execution. And I haven't done that before on IDE, so I don't know off the top of my head if you can do that or not. It's a good question. And if you can't, we should look for a Thea plugin to be able to do that. So we can, what's the best way to answer that later? I wouldn't mind following up. I got to figure out who asked it and how to do that. I guess we can go through the chat transcripts.
Sounds like a blog opportunity.
Oh yeah, blogs. Those are still things. So have you determined a way to limit access to the IDE to an IP address or an IP range? We don't do that now. There is a predictable URL pattern that you can use if you want to restrict access to it, but not a predictable IP pattern. That is also a feature request that we've gotten before that we intend to do. Because I know it's not always possible to limit based on URL. Can you add different remotes, Git remotes? Yep, just Git remote add. You've got full command line access to Git inside of your IDE. So Azure, DevOps, Bitbucket, etc. No problem. I see, how does it work in a clustered setup? I don't know what a clustered setup is. Mike, do you think you know what that means?
I don't.
I don't know if you want to ask a follow-up with a definition of clustered. Maybe we can answer that. All right, I'm just scrolling through chat and see what else we got. Yeah, it's interesting the way it says, does it support BLT? Really, it supports BLT as well or better than your local environment, because you can run commands. You got a Drupal site. The way that we've made BLT easier is, we have a bunch of environmental variables, so BLT can just know really easily, oh, it's an Acquia Cloud IDE. I know that means these are the database credentials, and this is where I can find the files directory and things like that. So there is a little bit of special sauce in there to make BLT a bit easier.
Yeah, like anything you can do within the your workspace directory, you can do, right? So anything you can add with Composer, you can do it. Anything that you can do through Composer build scripts or PHP overrides, like all that stuff works. The only thing I think is a limit. That's not a limitation. I think it's a protection. If there's a command you wanted to run in a Linux environment that requires sudo, you can't do that in a Cloud IDE. And that's a good thing, because that keeps your developers from installing things that would then deviate from that consistent configuration. So that's the way I look at it.
I see someone asked, can this be used for Drupal maintenance, like core updates, module updates? Yeah, absolutely. That's what it's here for. You log in, run Composer update or Drush update or however you do it. It'll write the changes and you can git commit it and you're good to go. Yep. Oh, look, Mike, you're getting a question about Acquia CMS.
Luke, Acquia CMS is currently in a private beta. If you're a current Acquia customer, reach out to your account manager and ask to participate, and you certainly can. But we're currently slated to release in early Q2 for GA.
Is it easy to sync files in my local machine in Cloud IDE? You can't do an SSH connection directly from your local machine to the IDE. Although the IDE can connect to an Acquia Cloud environment easily, and your local machine can connect to an Acquia Cloud environment easily. And Acquia CLI, it's already an IDE, and if you put it on your local machine, we have commands that automate all this for you. So you run Acquia CLI pull, and it pulls files, code, and database. But if you run Acquia CLI pull files, that'll pull just files, or push just files. There's a push command too. So Acquia CLI makes it really easy to push and pull either all together or one at a time, code, database, files to and from a machine and an Acquia Cloud environment. So I would suggest trying that out. Works pretty well. And that would be public and private files. Yeah, might actually just be public right now. I think I have to check on that. All right, pricing model. Yeah, let's talk about this a little bit more. It's per IDE. So you get one for free. And then you can buy more in packs. Like you can buy 5 more, or 10 more, 25 more, 50 more, etc. That's the whole pricing model. But the security model is that, you know, the IDE belongs to one developer, not 2. The IDE belongs to one subscription, not 2. So I think the way I would recommend getting IDEs is 1 per developer per application, not per site or environment, but 1 per developer per application. But you can be a little bit more frugal if you want, and you can say 1 per developer per subscription. And I think that would technically work too, but the workflow wouldn't be as easy. Okay. I think we've gone through everything. I'm sorry if I've missed any, but I feel pretty good about this.
Pretty thorough.
So let me pull up a slide before we wrap up so that you can all see these URLs. I think someone asked for this to be on the screen for longer. So some resources. We dropped this in chat before, but if you want to check out our product page, get more information, acquia.com/IDE. If you want detailed documentation, like what's in the container, how do I get started, what commands do I run, that sort of thing, you can go to our docs site/IDE. And if you'd like to see some YouTube videos to show the kind of step-by-step things that I did, how to create, how to debug, how to push and pull, we have a YouTube series available there, the tinyurl.com/createIDE, and you can go through those videos as well. So I think I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks everyone for this is really great. We had over 100 people, lots of questions. Feel free to reach out. We're happy to answer more. And for a lot of people on the call, you have access to IDEs today. And if you don't, we'd be happy to try to get it to you. So thanks a lot. And Megan, I don't know if you want to wrap up with any closing statements.
Thanks, Matt. Just one more reminder for everyone. The slides and the recording of this webinar will be posted to acquia.com.